Mr. Chairman, very much. Mr. Ciccone, thank you for being here and walking this tightrope that you are here today. Let me just begin. I heard you say that you feel that the regulations that were promulgated are a fair middle ground. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you also testified that as the rules have now been promulgated, that it is going to require no change in the business plans of AT&T. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're also testifying that it is creating a longer-term, predictable investment environment for AT&T. Is that also correct?
It's correct. Again, provided that the FCC continues to interpret the plain language of the rule in a narrow way, and again, I'd hope with appropriate regulatory humility.
But at this point, you have identified that appropriate level of humility. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people to hear. Okay, is there a problem, or is there something here that we are trying to cure that actually does not exist? Because obviously, before August of 2005, the non-discrimination principles were there, and the internet grew, expanded for years until that ruling in 2005. So all of these companies, Google, eBay, Hulu, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, all were able to be founded in that non-discriminatory era. Ms. Chase, from an entrepreneur's perspective, you're here representing thousands and thousands of smaller companies out there now looking at this decision or this potential resolution that the Republican majority is thinking of promulgating. What do you think would be the impact in terms of how the venture capital industry, other investors will now view these thousands of companies that are in this space trying to innovate using the internet?
If the venture capitalists think that I can't compete because I can't pay for special access or I might be stymied by special rules, clearly they wouldn't invest in us. Okay, and how many companies are in this space? I don't mean competing against Zipcar, but I'm talking just the companies that are dependent as smaller startups. We know if we think about innovation and job creation, we know that startups are the ones that have created all the jobs in the last 10 years, or 75% of them. So I would say significant numbers of them. Okay. Now,
This hope that the antitrust laws could be used. If you're Zipcar, how long would it take and how much would it cost Zipcar to use the antitrust process? And what is the likelihood that your vindication would be posthumous from a corporate perspective if a court ultimately did render a favorable decision?
You've made a very good point that without a body such as the FCC to whom I can turn, who can protect me, as a small business, you never sue anybody. You can never enter into that at all.
Right, and I agree with that. That's a false promise, false protection, because the antitrust law is clearly for smaller companies, and 80% of all new jobs in America are created by smaller companies, and a disproportionate number of them are now created by companies dependent upon the internet. So that's where our job creation comes from, and this is a huge decision that the Republicans are now making, intervening into a marketplace where AT&T says they can live with the rules, Comcast says they can live with the rules, and the smaller internet companies are all saying that they can live with the rules. Mr. Turner, when you were just asked who do you represent, could a simple explanation of who you represent just be the consumer?
We are a public interest advocacy group concentrated on the interests of consumers. Yes,
on the consumers, thank you. Now, why don't you just expand a little bit on what the impact of a repeal of these non-discriminatory principles could mean for consumers in the United States?
It could be devastating. Right now, I think through Mr. Ciccone's testimony, we've learned that there's really no problem the marketplace has with the FCC rules. However, if you remove that certainty, you then create potential discrimination against innovative companies like Mrs. Chase. You potentially have companies that would block content like Netflix because it competes with their online video products. You potentially have the next Netflix, the next Zipcar not being able to start their business, and consumers ultimately are the losers in that.
So if you are a kid in a dorm someplace and you've got an idea right now and your girlfriend is over at the business school and she says, maybe I can help you to raise some money right now, what is the difference in terms of the perspective of an investor if you have discrimination or non-discrimination principles on the books in terms of the startup of a small business that would ultimately provide consumers with more choice?
Well, it would create tremendous uncertainty, and I think we keep hearing, that there was never network neutrality to begin with, but I think that's really an inaccurate view of history. The Internet was born from the principle of non-discrimination. It existed for the 30 years before it even became commercialized, and it existed, as you mentioned, until 2005. It wasn't until that recent change that this got started.
Let me just finish on that point. And that was the testimony that we had here from Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the World Wide Web. He made it quite clear that when he created the World Wide Web, he baked the principle of non-discrimination into the personality of the Internet. He invented the World Wide Web. He's still only 54 years old, and that was the first witness that we had 4 years ago before the committee. So we can either give some deference to the inventor of the World Wide Web, which is the basis for all of this commercial activity, or we can just ignore it. But non-discrimination, he testified, was the central characteristic of the web. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.